Hello, welcome to Workshop. It's Wednesday.
Hello.
Wow. Hello.
How is everybody? And hello.
Hope you're well.
Yeah. So today we're covering math, or maths as I would call it. I don't know why it gets missing a H. The most stern it's Wednesday. Oh, stick drift. But yeah,
There we go.
it is indeed. We're back. God, my controllers are so scuffed at the moment. This is horrible.
Oh no.
Look at my hand.
They'll recover, maybe, hopefully.
I don't know. So, Ryu V and Aegis are going to go over maths today. Time for a maths lesson.
The maths folder in the Logix browser, as well as all of its subfolders. Things like
boy.
binary, matrix stuff, all that good stuff.
I don't know. I don't think
As
it's
well
good
as, like,
stuff. I
some
think it's
examples.
scary.
Well, maybe hopefully after this stream it won't be as scary.
Maybe. But yeah.
Or it might be more scary, you never know.
I don't want to know.
You're gonna learn.
Damn turkey. Bloody turkeys.
Math bird.
Yeah, look. My arm's gone.
Oh no.
There it is.
Oh.
And it's back.
Nope, nope. Yeah.
Let's do integrals and derivatives. No.
No.
I took calculus classes. Never again.
There we go. Let's make you two louder so everyone can hear you properly now.
Loud.
Now it... Do you know, it's funny, I do audio from Viewpoint, it doesn't matter when you guys are on broadcast anyway.
Yeah. Just do both.
Yeah. Anyway, who wants the camera first? You, Ryu V? Right, well what I'll do is, before we go, before I set the camera on you, I'm going to
Shall
go...
we go through
Is it that one?
and start?
Yeah. I think
Since
we
it is a
can-
big topic.
Yes, it is
You
a very
know-
big topic, so
Do you know,
can
I always
begin.
say it, and I'll say it again and again and again to Twitch. Oh, the camera's still on the centre, by the
So,
way. I haven't put it on you yet, Ryu
First
V.
off, over here,
Ryu V!
we have all of the nodes that are available in the math folder and all of its subfolders. This is everything you can find all at once. It looks like a lot, but that's probably just the binary nodes, which are gargantuan. They're the biggest nodes that Logix has, but they're really not all that complicated once we get to that. So the first thing we're going to want to cover is the main folder nodes in the math folder, there are a few categories of useful nodes in here, and all of them I use, well, almost all of these I use quite a lot. They all have their use cases. But we have, of course, our standard trigonometric functions, sine, cosine, tangents, arcsine, arccosine, arctangent, and atan2, which atan2 I use for if I need to map something that has two axes of rotation to something on a circle. Useful. Next we have our... I'm considering these kind of standard math functions. We have absolute value, average, logarithm of some base, the sign of something, whether it's a positive or negative, delta, which is the change in something across each frame, alongside things like square root and so on and so forth. The one that is sort of not a standard math function in here that is still quite useful is ping pong, which it does exactly what it sounds like, is it will, given a value that's incrementing or decrementing and a magnitude, it will ping pong between that value up and back and up and down. Like a ping pong ball.
There's an option in Panner components that has that option too, where it ping pongs between the max and min of a value that you put in.
And this is just the Logix form of that, essentially. A triangular wave, well, Julino _ asks, a triangular wave? Essentially. But it's for any value that you want to ping pong back and forth, and this includes float 2, float 3, any of them. One thing I should mention actually before I go on is all of these nodes can work with essentially any type of number. Like these are all floats, but they'll work with float 3s, integers, whatever you need. Next, we have our interpolation nodes, which what interpolation is, I'll explain in a little bit once we cover these nodes, what that generally is, but it's smoothly, interpolating, it's actually the word, smoothly going between two defined points, or two numbers in this case. There's all sorts of nodes for this. There's linear interpolation, hi Wraith, I can hear myself. We have cubic lerp for lerping things that is not linear, but in a cubic fashion, which we can cover in a bit too. Inverse lerp, if you're lerping between, if you're interpolating between numbers, you use lerp. If you're interpolating between rotations, you use slurp, or spherical linear interpolation. Because rotational or quaternion values are four-dimensional and have to do with spheres, and it's complicated, but generally, you're dealing with rotations, you want to use slurp instead of lerp. Next, also, I almost forgot, the last node in here is probably the most useful and greatest lerp node of all. Smooth lerp. Although, let's not forget about constant lerp, but me saying that is probably blasphemy. Next, we have our number clamping and remapping. We have, of course, clamp, which allows you to clamp a number between a minimum and maximum value. Oops, clamp 0, 1 does exactly what this does, except it clamps it between, 0 and 1. Oh, actually, before we move on, we have a question from Kuromae called asking constant lerp. Yes, constant lerp. I can get to that. Once we get to the examples over there, where I'll be covering smooth lerp, but I can cover constant lerp as well. Now over here we have min and max, which of course, given it what this does is return the minimum of all of the values that you provide, or the maximum of all of the values provide. I use these if I need to clamp from one side, because if I plug in a number here on max and I leave the bottom one as 0, or I don't plug anything in, then it will give me the number that I want if it's greater than 0, but if the number that I want is below 0, it'll return 0, because 0 is higher than the number that I'm actually giving it in that example. We also have isBetween, which will check if a number is between two other numbers. This works for just number values, but it also works for positional values, or float 3s, where given two positional values, it'll essentially check the box that these values represent and check if a third position is between them. This also works in 2D with float 2s. Or integers, like the rest of these nodes, it works with any number type. Now, these two nodes down here I don't see used very often, the repeat nodes, but they essentially allow you, it's if you're familiar with modulo, or the node that we actually covered in the last stream with operators, this one, these are very similar in that you can use them to repeat a number sequence. This is more general, but this does, exactly what you want it to. Given a number, it'll repeat with a given length. And repeat 0, 1 is, it takes the value and clamps it between a value between 0 and 1. We have a question here from Kuromai saying, I still need to watch the two previous workshop streams. Are they of similar walls? Well, the previous stream covers the operators folder, so if you haven't seen us cover the operators, I definitely recommend watching that stream because it has a lot of useful things in it. We're now covering the math folder, and I think the next time we're going to cover a future folder, but we can discuss that. Anyhow, next in the math main folder we have our rounding functions, which we can round to the ceiling, round to the floor, round in general. And the main difference between these is, given, let's say we have 5, 6, and our number is 5.4. The ceiling will round this to 6. The floor will round that down to 5. And round will round it to, if it's less than 5.5, it'll round down. If it's greater than 5.5 in this case, it'll round up. Essentially, if you're at all familiar with rounding, this is how that works. These are just called the ceiling and the floor because, well, it's a ceiling and a floor. Similarly, if you're wanting to round these to a ceiling and a floor value, but you want them to be integers, there's nodes for those too. Now, as for the main nodes in the math folder, there are a lot, but they're all really quite useful. There's a couple of nodes here that I haven't personally used, like sigmoid, but I know that that is a mathematical function that given two inputs will give you a certain kind of output, e and power in this case. But the rest I've used quite a lot. Now, one thing I should mention that I did mention in the previous stream, which is where is the power node, or taking something to a power. Like, let's say you want 2 to the 6th power. How do you do that? Well, in programming, a lot of programming languages show it as this, but this is not power. This is the caret symbol here means XOR, or exclusive OR. Power, the actual legitimate power node, is here, POW. So if you ever want to take a number to an exponent, you use the POW node. Now, moving on, we get to our first subfolder, which is the binary folder. And what this folder mainly pertains to is binary numbers, or bits and bytes, and all of this stuff. Our first subcategory here is our binary adders. We have an adder, a half adder, and a Boolean counter. These two are very much intrinsic to how a CPU works in a computer, because at a fundamental level, this is how a CPU adds numbers, either with a carry or without. But just generally know that if you're wanting to add binary or true and false values, you can use adder and half adder if you don't need a carry. And a Boolean counter, given a number of bools input, it will tell you how many are true, how many are false, and how many there are total. I can see where that's useful now that I'm thinking about it, but I've never actually used it myself. But it exists. Next, we have our, I guess I'll consider them conversion nodes, which allow you to convert between a bunch of different number values. Like you can say, oh, I want to use this float as an unsigned integer, or I want to use this unsigned long integer as a double, and so on and so forth. I should note that there is a value here called half, but this is just here for completeness. You can't actually use the half value. It's just that C#, which is what Logix and Neos is based on, has a math value called a half, which is a half precision float. But again, they're here for completeness. They're not necessarily usable, at least as far as I'm aware, but something to note. Next up, these two categories kind of go hand in hand. These are our bit composition and bit extraction nodes. And what these do is they look complicated and huge, but they're really quite not. If we have a byte, let's say 0000001, then this byte, these 8 bits, represents the number 1. If I turn this to 0, all zeros and 1, 1, that's 2 plus 1, that's 3. And what we're doing here is, given this compose bits byte, you can compose a bunch of true-false values and get a number. For instance, if I do, or well, actually, let's do, if this was all ones, for example, in binary, then this would come out to 255. If you're unfamiliar with how, that would definitely be something to come join the workshop stream after, when the world is open to the public, and I can explain a little bit of binary, but search engines are your friend here as well. However, in regards to that, we have the compose bits for all of the number types. The reason some of these nodes are short and some of them are incredibly long is because a byte has 8 bits, a short has 16 bits, integer is 32, and longs are 64 bits. Hence why they have 8, 16, 32, and 64 bits inputs like this. And why these nodes are the longest nodes in Logix. Well, unless you decide to keep adding inputs to a node like this, but you get my point. Okay. Essentially, that's basically it for binary. We can next move on to constants, which, if you're unfamiliar with the constants folder, these are very handy, very useful, and there might be one or two in here that folks don't necessarily know about that will be very handy. There's only a few nodes in here, but we have nodes related to pi, mathematical constants, and constant conversion multipliers, which I'll start right to left because I want to get to that node last. So these degrees to radians and radians to degrees, these are the numbers that you can multiply something by to convert from degrees to radians and from radians to degrees. So if you were to take 90 degrees and multiply it by this number, the degrees to radians multiplier, you would get 90 degrees in radians, and vice versa with the radians to degrees node. So these are multipliers, and that's how you use those. Next, we have our general constants, which is E, which is the constant, I forgot the exact name of it, but it's this number, 2.718. If you're doing anything with exponentials or logarithms or anything that has to deal with rate of change, or compound interest, things like that, this number is very useful. And we have phi, or the golden ratio, which if you're doing anything with kind of graphics design or something that needs to look pretty, or it does anything with Fibonacci, golden ratio is useful. And next we have pi, which is pi divided by 2, because this is used quite a lot, pi, and tau. So if you're ever dealing with a circle, you know that a circle is a full circle. That is a horrible circle. Let's try again. A full circle is, if you go halfway around, that's pi. And if you go all the way around, that's pi times 2, or 2 pi. Tau, on the other hand, is 2 pi. Pi times 2 and tau are exactly the same. So, use this node instead of... That's not pi. Instead of doing this. So it saves you 2 nodes. Tau does. Because these are exactly the same. Pi. Not that kind of pi. Although pi wouldn't be a bad idea right now.
You can measure pi with a pi.
Yes, as long as you make it round. You can have a
Yes.
square pi. Anyhow, next up is the datetime subfolder, which what this deals with is anything related to dates or a specific date and time and getting information from that. We have our datetime construction nodes over here, which this one is the largest and most obvious, which is construct datetime, and that allows you to, given a year, month, day, blah blah blah, all the way down to the millisecond, it will give you that specific date. Which, if you don't provide anything, it gives you the current day. We also have from Unix milliseconds, which, given a millisecond number in, I think, in epoch time, it'll give you a date. From Unix seconds in epoch time, it'll give you a date. And down here we have UTC now, which gives you, well, right now. So you can see exactly when we're doing the stream. And we have local user time offset, so you are, if this will get you your offset from UTC, essentially your time zone. And this, for me, shows as -5 because I am in US Central Time. However, for the stream, since Wraith is streaming, this shows you Wraith's time offset. Which is 1. So do note that this is local for each user. Next, we have our information. Let's see, what do I call this category? This is extracting these bits of information from the... Oh, hold on a moment. I'm seeing chat is saying that the stream is breaking. Oh dear. Everything going well, Wraith? Okay. The video's choppy, okay. Might have just been a weird network thing. Anyhow. What these nodes allow you to do is, given a date time, it will tell you, okay, what year is it? What's the day of the year? What's the month? What's the day of the week? And etc. All the way down to milliseconds and ticks. Ticks is relative to the tick rate, I believe, that Neos uses, which I'm not entirely sure what the tick rate is, but it's, regardless of any kind of a date time you have here, it'll give you a very large number because ticks are very, 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 very small amounts of time. Also, you'll notice here that the day of the week gives you a different kind of output than an integer. It gives you a, well, day of the week, enum, or enumeration, which is, well, it's your day of the week. Now, if you want to figure out how to use this as an integer value, we'll actually get to that later. Actually, we'll get to that just next. Next, we have, date time, I guess I'll call this manipulators, which this allows you to get you the kind of the date time, and I'm not entirely sure what it is here. I think this is, yeah, so you can determine if a date time is based on UTC or a local time, or not specified. Which that's actually what the bottom input here on the construct date time is. We also have set kind if you want to set it to be, hey, this time is in UTC, or hey, this time is a local time. You can also provide in here user time and user time offset given a user, and it will tell you their time and their time offset. Next, we have nodes which allow you to get various information from a date time, like changing this date time to your local time, to universal time, or UTC, and converting it to Unix milliseconds and Unix seconds, respectively. Next up, we have what looks to be an itty-bitty little category, which is enums, but these two nodes are actually have a value type associated with them, and what these do is these convert an enum, or an enumeration value, to an integer, which what an enumeration value under the hood is, say we have the day of the week thing, we have Sunday, Monday, and etc. Internally, what this is stored as is just an integer. So say Sunday is 0, Monday is 1, blah blah blah, up to 6 in this case. So what these two nodes allow you to do is they allow you to convert between the type and an integer, and back again. Okay, and if we click on these two nodes here, we have the various types that you can utilize with the enums. Now there are a few other enum types, but you do have to construct them separately. Nerdosaur, does Ryuvi know how nice their handwriting is? Because they should. Thanks. I mean, I don't think it's nice, but that's just me. Boy, you didn't want to see my handwriting like 10 years ago because it was literally chicken scratch. I mean, I am a bird, so whatever. But I try my best. Now, what these nodes do, I didn't make them the best type here, so let's actually go to enums, enum to int. Do we have... Well, that's actually quite interesting, is that the day of week type is not listed in here, so we're gonna have to show you... I'll show you later how to construct a custom logics node for cases like this. However, moving on, we have the matrix nodes, which what these do is these deal with a position, rotation, scale matrix, because internally an object's position, rotation, and scale is stored as one matrix. In this case, it is a 4x4 matrix. Looks like this. And what these nodes do is they allow you to, given a rotation, a scale, both, or all of them, you can compose them into this matrix. And then you can do matrix operations on it if you need to, and then get your position, rotation, and scale values out of it. I've never had to use these, but I can see why they're useful if for some reason you need or want to use matrix operations on these values instead of just, well, using the appropriate position, rotation, and scale nodes accordingly. But moving on, there's not too much to cover here. We're going to move on to quantity. And the quantity nodes are, similarly, there's not very many here, but what they, similar to enums, they allow you to do things based on quantity values, which, what are quantity values? Well, they're things like acceleration, angle, mass, voltage, etc. So, if you know the, like, you know, velocity is in, say, meters per second, for example, then you can, if you're typing out, say, you know, 1.5, here, let me actually draw it because I do have this. Let's say you do 1.5 meters per second, you'd use velocity, and it will actually understand this notation, and give it to you as a number. And there's 4 nodes for that. There's base value, which, given a value, in this case it would be an angle, it would give you the base value of that. And similarly, given a base value, which, if I plug this in, let's say 6, then it gives you, I believe this is in radians. Let's find out, let's put 1 in here. Not quite, but that gives you that value as an angle. And vice versa. Similarly, we have parse quantity, which, if you're just typing it out as a string, you can parse something as whatever quantity type you like, and given a quantity, you can format it to output it as a string. Now, moving on, we have the random folder, which is not quite a random folder, but it contains random things. Well, not quite. Okay, this folder's not living up to its name, but the nodes live up to their name of what they do. And the random folder contains nodes which allow you to get random values, random points in a shape, random points on the surface of a shape, random colors, random booleans, and a random rotation. Now, random float, it comes in 3 variants. Well, you have float, float 2, and float 3. And I think you can work with a float 4, but I've never tried it. But essentially what these do is, given a minimum and maximum value, it will return a value every single frame, between the minimum and maximum value, the maximum value excluded. So if you say, if I put an input of 5 for the minimum and a maximum of 10, it'll give me a value between 5 and 9.9999999 repeating, not quite 10. If you want to include 10, make sure to set that to something like 11. That's specifically very relevant for integers. Now, one thing I should note about interesting, it doesn't work for float 4s. Well, thanks for clearing that up. For the combination float values, like float 2s and float 3s, it does this for each of the values independently. So if you have, say, your minimum is 1, 2 for a float 2, and your maximum is 100, 200, then it's essentially exactly the same as 2 random float 1s. It'll do it independently for each number pair. As for the random points in a circle, and all of these, point in a cube, point in a sphere, and point in a square, this gets you a point relative to origin and a unit-sized shape of this type. It gets you a random point inside this. And essentially, the difference between in a circle, in this case, and on a circle is in a circle will give you a point anywhere inside this circle, whereas on a circle will only get you a point on the surface of the circle.
Particle effects have emitters like that too, where you can either emit from shell, which pretty much is like on this surface, or like the edges of a sphere, box, or circle, or cone, depending on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much the same kind of effect here. But this is for
available,
generic values.
Available as a node.
Yeah.
Next up, we have our random colors. Yeah, that's...
Seizure-inducing. Let's not bring that out.
So, I would demonstrate these nodes, but as I just showed, what this does is this changes color or a value or an RGB value every single frame, so it's just totally a flashing color, so we're not going to show it here. But if you need to get a random color, that's how you can do it. Similarly, you can get a random true or false value, and you can give it a chance value. So, if you don't plug anything, it's half and half. So every single frame, there's a chance that it will be true or false, half and half. But if you provide it, say, 0.8, then, or let's say 0.9, then it will be true most of the time. Similarly, if I put 0.1, it will be false most of the time.
There we go. That should work better.
Yeah. So we just smoothed this out, and you can see that the value is random. Every single frame. Just kind of going all over the place. Of course, the value that it's giving is not smoothed like this, it's just a completely different color every frame. But we don't want chat to start having a seizure, so we've smoothed it. Oh, random turkey, yes, good. This is the random rotation node, which gives you, well, a random rotation. And it's back. One thing I should note before I move on is to use these nodes, you generally want to write the value if you need to store it or use it immediately. And what I mean by that is if we get a float and we write this value to it, then every time I pulse this, I get a new random value. So even though this value is constantly changing, we're essentially just sampling from it once and getting a value. And that's how you can use these. Or you could spam it and just, well, then there's no point in using a write.
Well, it's basically taking a snapshot at the point of that value.
Seeker, perfect node for Thanksgiving. Yes.
I do have examples
but you were saying?
I did bring in some more examples we can look over too after covering the rest.
Next up, we have the node tree. The node graph is
I must
gone.
have. Okay, there we go.
let's see. Next up, we have rect, or rectangle, or yeah. And what these deal with is these deal with the x, y, and width height values that you use in, say, a UIX canvas. If I just show here a rect transform, we can see that this rect transform, given a given a size, it has an x position, a y position, a width, and a height. And these are calculated automatically internally, but the rect nodes here allow you to create a rect as well as do conversions and convert a rect back to xy width height, a minimum and a maximum value, and a position and a size. Which are quite useful. I haven't personally used rect because they're currently, there's no way, I don't think, at least as far as I'm aware, there's no way to get a rect from a UIX panel, but you can construct them and deconstruct them if you need to. Not too much else to say here, so we're going to move on to rotation, which this is a folder that I use a lot. And what these nodes do is they allow you to convert from a Euler value, or pitch, yaw, and roll, to a quaternion value, which is a four-dimensional value, a four-dimensional rotational value that is so you can't gimbal lock a quaternion. Now, what I mean by an Euler, if you're unfamiliar, looks like Euler, but it's actually pronounced Euler, is a value like, say, 45 degrees, 30 degrees, negative 15 degrees. And what for instance, the from Euler node gets you is this turns this into this, which is a quaternion. The big difference between Euler angles and quaternions is that Euler angles can experience what's called gimbal lock, where if you rotate by 90 degrees on an axis, you lose a degree of rotation. So you'll rotate by 90 degrees, and let's say you want to try and rotate on an axis, and if you rotate on this axis, it'll rotate like this, but if you also rotate on this axis, it'll also rotate like that. And that's a problem, because you lose a degree of rotation when that happens. Quaternion values, on the other hand, don't get bound by gimbal lock and work regardless. And again, fun fact, they're four-dimensional. But in short, we have quaternion to Euler, Euler to quaternion, and I'm calling these this singular node the modifier node, which gets you the inverse of that rotation, which the inverse in relation to numbers is equivalent to 1 divided by that, sort of. Okay. Next, we have the shaping nodes, which there's only 4 of them, and these kind of sort of don't make sense at first, but they do make sense once you understand how they work. There's 3 categories. There's trigonometric shaping, smooth shaping, and exponential shaping, or symmetric power shaping. And what these do, which we'll demonstrate too later, is given a value between 0 and 1, it will take that linear value between 0 and 1 and shape it or smooth it accordingly. So say you have a linear value that's going between one value and another, and you want it to be smooth at the start and the end. You would use smooth step. Or if you want it to be even smoother, you'll use smoother step. I'm surprised we don't have a smoothest step, but maybe. Symmetric power shape allows you to control it with a power value. So you can get lots of different kinds of shapes with that too. Of course, sine shape gives it like a sine wave. And finally, the last subfolder we have under the math is time span. And time span, similar to date time, allows you to convert to get how many days, hours, or minutes are in a time span, how many total days, hours, minutes, etc. are in a time span, and it allows you to also, given a number of days, hours, minutes, or whatever, you can convert that into a time span, which a time span is just what you get if you take two specific times and subtract them, and that is the time between them, essentially. And this is the light pink node here. That's what time span is. And, in general, these are the nodes that you can find in the math category. Now, since we only have about 19 minutes left in this stream, let's quickly cover our examples. First one I wanted to cover is linear interpolation. Now, if you're not familiar with what this is given two values and a interpolation value, it will get you the value that is, in this case, 45% of the way between 0 and 30. In this case, 13.5. If I set this to oops, let's not set it to oops, but if I set this to 0, it gives us our start value. If I set it to 1, it gives us our end value. If I set it to 0.5, it's directly in the middle. 0.1, it's 10% of the way between them, and etc. Now, if you click the little plus on a lerp here, it turns into a multi-lerp, and now what this does is a value between 0 and 1 will get you between these two, and a value between 1 and 2 will get you between these two, and so on and so forth if you were to add more values. This is actually quite useful if you want to interpolate between multiple different points. If you want to smoothly interpolate between points, though, great segue into the one and only smooth lerp. So what smooth interpolation does is, given a value and a speed, if you change the value, it will smoothly go between the previous value and the new one you just set. It's going to 10, now it's going to 19, and if I reduce the speed, it goes slower. If I increase the speed, it goes faster. This is really useful if you want things to happen over a little bit of time, and smoothly at that. Now there's a bunch, as we noted earlier, there are a handful of smoothing nodes, I should say, like smooth slurp. Where is it? Well, you can convert a smooth lerp node into a smooth slurp by plugging in a rotation. And this is how you smooth rotational values. Because if you try and smooth a rotational value using a smooth lerp instead of a smooth slurp, it will give incorrect rotation values. That's how you do that. Next, we have a itty-bitty demonstration of compose bits byte. Just like I was demonstrating earlier, this is a binary number, and these are your bits. So the first bit is 1, second bit is 2, third bit is 4. They're all powers of 2. And depending on combinations of these, you can get any number between, in this case, 0 and 255. Why those specific numbers? Because if it's all false, it's 0. And if they're all true, it's 255. These are your minimum and maximum values.
You can make a combination lock with that.
Absolutely. You'd have 255 different values. Or 256, I should say, because 0 is a value.
Yes.
Next up is just a demonstration of pi and tau. Pi is pi, tau is 2 pi. Great. Use this instead of pi times 2. Saves you a couple of nodes. Next we have constructing a datetime, shown here. I have constructed the... well, it's actually been changed. I don't know who changed it, but okay. It's constructing... November 24th, 2022. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Do you know what November the 4th... Do you know what date that is?
I do not.
Have a guess.
Is it your birthday?
It's your birthday.
No.
Is it your birthday?
No. It's Turkey Day.
Oh no, I see what you did there.
Right. Brain go burr. Yes, thanks. I initially had this set to February 1st, 2020, which is when I joined. But this works too. But essentially, this allows you to plug in a year, month, day, hour, minute, second, millisecond, blah blah blah, and get a date and time from that. Next, we have enum to int. In this case, I'm using chirality, which left is 0, right is 1. Cool, that's all there is to it. Now, earlier I mentioned how we wanted to convert a day of the week into an integer, and to construct a custom node, you have to do this through an inspector. So we're going to create new empty object. We're going to attach a component. And this time we're going to go under logics. And we want math, enums, enum to int. Let's see if it's in here. It's not.
in
So I'm going to
Shadowcast
type
mode.
day of week. Is that how it is? Is it day of week? Huh. Interesting. There must be a reason why day of week doesn't show up, or maybe I'm just getting the type wrong, but generally, if you have a node that you need to custom create, this is how you do it. And for some reason day of week is just exempt from this, but you get the point. Next, we have a matrix demonstration, which say you have a scale of 1 and 1.5 and 2, and a rotation of 45 and 25 degrees respectively, then it's in this case it's three-dimensional matrix. Looks like that. Completely unreadable versus these values, but if you need to store them in a single type, a single value, that's how you can do that. You can also do matrix operations on this too, since it is a float 3x3. Actually, we have an interesting suggestion here from Stiflejackal saying using system.dayofweek. It might be that. Let's just see if that works. Math, enums, enum to int. System, if I can type. Ah, wow, you are correct. Thank you very much for giving this. Now I can demonstrate this. So when you have a correct type that you've entered in, this will turn blue and tell you that, hey, enum to int of type day of week. If I double click this, it makes our node. And how do you get a node from an inspector? Well, you unpack it. And here is your custom node. And what this does is it takes a day of the week and converts it to an integer. Like so. Perfection. Which today is 3.
Wednesday.
Not Wednesday, 3.
It is 3, my dudes.
Yes. Next we have random. This just shows that given a 2 minimum values of 1 and 5 and 2 maximum values of 5 and 50, it will give you 2 random values between 1 and 5 and between 5 and 50. Separately, as you can see. And it's every frame, of course, so you have to use a value or sample it with a write and store it for later. Unless you just want a literal random value every single frame. There you go. Next we have rect construction, which given a minimum value and a maximum value, you get your rectangle, which has an x and y of here, and a width and height here. Next, we have look rotation, which is one of the rotation nodes. Given 2 directional values, a forward and an up, it gives you that look rotation. So, say, there's 3 axes to a rotation. You've got your forward, your right, and your up. And given 2 of these, this gives you a specific look rotation. So if you're trying to have something look in a direction, you can specify forward and an up, because you only need to specify 2 angles instead of all 3 to get a direction, and that's how you do it. So in this case, if your forward is forward, and your up is forward, then your rotation is that. Cool. I use it quite a lot if you need something to look at something else. Actually, Kuromai points out, why is the width negative? Well, the width is negative here is because our minimum and maximum values here are... Our maximum value is greater than our minimum, which probably isn't possible, so if I swap these, then our width is positive. So it's internally performing a subtraction between your minimum and maximum. I would assume that you'd want your minimum values to be less than your maximum values, but if for some reason they're not, you get negative numbers. So be aware of that. Thanks for pointing that out, Kuromai. Next, we have shaping, which, given a time value, which this is just the number of seconds that the number of seconds with a decimal point of how long the session has been running. We're taking this value and using the repeat node, which is taking whatever this value is and converting it between 0 and 1. You can see it just constantly cycles back through. And in doing so, we are getting our sinusoidal shape, which is fast at first and then slows down, instead of just being linear. Now, finally, here, given a time span, which this is interesting input node, which you can't get by trying to get an input node normally. You can get this from input uncommon system.timespan. And this allows you to put in seconds, minutes, hours, days, maybe more than that. But I think if I just add more days here, it will do that. This shows you how you can get the days in the time span, the hours, and how many, in this case, total minutes. So how long is 6 days, 6 hours, 50 minutes, and 35 seconds? Well, it's 9,050.58 blah, blah, blah minutes. Cool. If I change this to, I don't know, 60 days, then it shows, hey, this is 60 days long and 86,800 minutes. So, useful if you need to figure out how long there is between something or how long until something. And over here, we just have some basic demonstrations of some of the trigonometric functions. In this case, we're graphing over time, cosine and sine. These multipliers just say, okay, cosine is left and right, so it's going back and forth at a time of 1, and I'm multiplying the sine value by 3, so it's going up and down 3 times faster, which is why it's making this shape. And then I'm multiplying that by 0.5, because if I don't, it'll go off the screen, so I'm making sure it's scaled accordingly. In short, what these values are is given a circle and a point on the circle, cosine gives us this length, and sine gives us that length. So depending on where you are on the circle, these values will oscillate back and forth, like this. In fact, if I don't multiply sine and just have them both oscillate at the same value, you get a circle. Very handy if you need, well, a circle. Finally, we have a couple of examples here provided by Aegis. And Aegis, I'll let you take over from here so you can show what you'd like to show.
First off here, I have this binary clock here, and it actually is utilizing the extract bits node, which is in the binary node, as well as different time nodes to construct a time using binary. So it takes like an integer, brings it in here, and you can actually see the different values change here as they count up. Right now, this is plugged into the seconds right here, and then you can see the value going up and change depending on which number it is. It's a really good way of like visualizing how binary is read by computers.
That's actually a great way to show binary.
Kind of passes the true node all across, and then once it hits there and it fills it all, then it resets.
This is also how an adder and a half adder works too.
Now, this other example here is a mesh generator I was playing around with years ago that utilized the random nodes. So if I have a look here with the random float 3s plugged into here, what that does, it's just placing these random boxes and wire boxes inside like a, well, determined size, and it just spawns these random boxes and bakes them together into a neat little doodad thing.
Very pretty.
Since we're starting to run low on time, I'll kind of go over these other 2 examples, or 3 examples real quick. Now, going back a few workshops, we went over making some like example weapons. Now we used a few nodes as well too. This is another example of what you can use a random node for, is making different sound effects without adding new sound effect clips, is by changing the speed slightly, which would change the pitch of it, and having the values plugged into here. You can change the pitch of the value of the sound each time you shoot. I don't think this is connected, that's why.
Because it plays on the duplicate slot.
Yeah, it does. The slot it's on, it's disabled. And you can see other similar notes here too from the math folder, like clamp 01. This is like a elapsed time. It makes sure it doesn't basically take this number and just kind of clamps it down there so it's not an astronomically high number. Because then you get to floating point.
No one likes floating point.
Yes. At least with elapsed time, you can always reset it. Now, going back, I brought this out earlier too, but this is a good example of using the delta node in here too. So this one's basically using the speed at which the projectile is being shot out. And I realize I'm also shooting out logics too, which is funny.
That's terrifying, shooting logics at your enemies. They'd run away.
I mean, technically, if it's a projectile that's calculated with trajectory, you could. Now, I have a couple examples from this car here that was brought in earlier too. This has a lot of different stuff for rotation that I can show. As you can see, like, this is for turning the whole vehicle like around when you steer it around, because you can get the turn radius, which is like a dynamic variable that's within the car, and then you could take that as a input to basically turn the car depending on how big the wheels are or how far apart the wheels are. You can even see radians to degrees as well too. The same kind of node setup, or similar node setup, is for making the wheels spin as well too. So, yeah.
Very nice. And it does seem we are just almost out of time, so let's go ahead and head behind our desk because we've covered just about everything.
All in all, that the math nodes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of examples out there.
Oh
Those
yeah,
nodes
there's a
are
lot.
used everywhere.
There is quite a lot to cover on that regard with the math stuff. It can get quite confusing as well. So,
But that's why we have mentors, and you can ask us and other people who do
Wiki.
logics too. The
Yeah.
Wiki, oh yes.
Probable
definitely.
Primes tutorials.
Yes.
But yeah, once again, thanks to Ryuvi and Aegis for covering these topics. As I say, I can't cover these topics, they can. So, we're either going to be doing some examples in 2 weeks, or we do WebSockets.
I guess we could go with examples, unless you'd like to tackle WebSockets.
No. I need at least a couple of... I need a bit to get that all sorted.
Fair enough.
Because I want to, because then
next
it means
time-
I need to draft up some examples and some asynchronous stuff.
Well, then, next stream we'll cover various logics examples.
Yeah. So in 2 weeks from now, we'll be doing some logics examples, and then in 4 weeks, we're going to be doing WebSockets.
And yes, Brain. Neos does natively support WebSockets as well as HTTP post and GET, and some Twitch-specific functions too.
Yeah. And I will say at least that, that is one topic that I am qualified to talk about,
Great.
considering how much stuff I do with WebSockets. So, thanks all for watching. Oh, my hand is so screwed. These controllers
Yeah,
are...
that's under the network category.
Yep. There is a bit more to it than just that network, though, because you do... WebSockets is one of the things that actually uses both components and logics together. Not many things require you to use a component and logics. WebSockets do.
Spooky.
Spooky indeed. Speaking of, Halloween stuff coming up soon.
I have to decorate this place.
Yeah, text-only WebSockets, yes. There is some other trickery that you can do with web stuff, but it gets a bit complicated. It's like I have things that pull audio from websites depending on certain situations that are going on within a world, for example. But yeah, anyway, thanks all for watching. This has been the workshop. We're here every fortnight on Twitch, so be sure to check us out. Just keep an eye on Discord for the announcements as to when we stream. And as I say, thanks to Ryuvi and Aegis as usual. Thanks, guys.
And you're more than welcome to join the world here for an hour afterwards if you have any further questions or would like to learn more.
Yes, we do. We do open the workshop for an hour after the stream. It might be a bit shorter than an hour. It depends what we're doing and how busy we get. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and we will catch you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Is it that one? Oh my god. My controls are spazzing out again.
Oh no.